West Side Story, 1961. Summary, plot and themes. West Side Story, directed by Robert Wise and Jerome Robbins, 1961, is a film musical that turns a street rivalry into a modern tragedy. It is famous for its songs and choreography, but its real power is how clearly it shows the machinery of conflict, pride, fear, and the need to belong. This West Side Story summary follows Tony, a former Jet trying to live clean, and Maria, the sister of Shark's leader Bernardo. They fall in love fast, and their private promise becomes public provocation. Around them, two gangs treat territory as identity and identity as something you defend with fists, then blades, then guns. The film is bright on the surface and ruthless underneath. Music does not soften the story, it concentrates it. When characters sing, they are not escaping reality. They are naming what they cannot safely say in the open: desire, envy, dread, and the hunger to be seen. The film keeps tightening a single dilemma. Tony believes love can change him, and Maria believes love can change what surrounds them. The street believes something else, that mercy makes you weak, and weakness gets you erased. The story turns on whether Tony and Maria can escape the logic of revenge, names and terms. Tony, former Jet, trying to build a new life, love pulls him back into danger. Maria, Bernardo's younger sister, her love becomes her rebellion. Riff, Jet's leader, Tony's best friend, needs the rumble to prove the Jets still matter. Bernardo, Shark's leader, Maria's brother, treats Tony as a threat to family and status. Anita, Bernardo's partner and Maria's confidante, proud, practical, and later brutalized. Chino, a shark linked to Maria by expectation, becomes the vehicle of revenge. Doc, shop owner and Tony's employer, tries to mediate and cannot control the fallout. Lieutenant Schrank, police officer, pushes both gangs with threats and contempt. Officer Krupke, Schrank's partner, represents a system that mocks more than it helps. The rumble, the gang's arranged fight, a ritual meant to settle pride and territory. Full plot. Spoilers start here. This tragedy is built from a clear chain. Public rivalry creates private risk. Private risk creates desperate choices, and desperate choices produce irreversible harm. Here is the full plot summary with spoilers. The film opens with the Jets and the Sharks battling for control of the Upper West Side. Schrank and Krupke break up the fight with threats and insults, which only deepens the sense that the neighborhood has no adult protector. Riff, leader of the Jets, wants a rumble to prove the Jets still matter. He recruits Tony, a former Jet who now works for Doc and is trying to live differently. Tony resists, but he follows Riff to a neighborhood dance where both gangs will be present. On the Shark side, Bernardo leads with pride and vigilance. His sister Maria is excited for the dance and for a new chapter of life, and Anita helps her get ready while teasing her about romance. At the dance, the gangs keep to separate sides, watching for disrespect. Tony sees Maria, and they fall in love instantly. Bernardo spots them, pulls Maria away, and warns Tony off, treating the romance as an attack on family honor. Riff arranges a meeting at Doc's drugstore with Bernardo to set rules for the rumble. Tony attends to push for restraint and argues hard for a fistfight rather than weapons. A fragile agreement is reached. Then, Schrank and Krupke interrupt and break up the meeting, humiliating both groups and making the conflict feel even more inevitable. Tony and Maria meet again in secret. Their love quickly becomes a plan: meet at Doc's, get money, and run. As the rumble approaches, both gangs tighten into performance, terrified of backing down, and the city's adults respond with pressure rather than protection. Tony goes to the fight site, determined to stop it. The confrontation spirals. Fists turn to knives. Bernardo stabs and kills Riff. Tony, shocked and enraged, grabs a blade and kills Bernardo in return. Police sirens approach, and everyone flees, leaving the two leaders dead and the rivalry now fueled by grief. Maria learns Bernardo is dead and is devastated. Chino takes a gun and hunts Tony. Tony comes to Maria, begs forgiveness, and says he will surrender. Maria is torn between horror and love, but she chooses Tony and commits to the escape plan because staying means waiting for the next retaliation. The Jets regroup under ice, shaken and cornered. Anybody's warns them that Chino is searching for Tony with a gun, and the Jets decide to find Tony first. Some of that urgency is protective, and some of it is control. The gang wants to decide how Tony will act and how the Jets will look in the aftermath. Meanwhile, Schrank pressures Maria for information, suggesting that cooperation might keep her safe. Maria refuses. She sends Anita to docks with a message for Tony: "Wait for Maria and do not do anything reckless." Anita agrees, despite grief, because she sees that Maria's plan offers the only chance to stop the killing. At docks, the Jets taunt Anita and escalate into an attempted sexual assault. Doc stops it, but Anita is shattered by the attack. In rage and pain, she lies and says that Chino has killed Maria, weaponizing the one thing she can still control: what Tony believes. Doc repeats Anita's lie to Tony and gives him the money to flee. Tony breaks and runs into the streets, calling for Chino to kill him too. In a playground, Tony sees Maria alive and runs to her, but Chino appears and shoots Tony. Tony dies in Maria's arms. Maria takes the gun and confronts both gangs, blaming their hatred for the deaths of Riff, Bernardo, and Tony. Her speech turns the gang logic inside out. If everyone thinks violence proves strength, then everyone must also admit they have become killers. The police arrive, Chino is arrested, and the remaining Jets and Sharks lift Tony's body and carry it away together, with Maria following. Act 1. Setup and inciting incident. The normal world is constant rivalry and constant policing, with the Jets and Sharks using each other as mirrors for pride and fear. Tony's desire is to become someone new, and his flaw is believing he can leave the gang identity without it pulling him back. The inciting incident is Tony meeting Maria because their love turns a territorial feud into a personal crisis that cannot be contained. What changes here is that the conflict becomes intimate, not just tribal. Act 2. Escalation and midpoint shift. The rumble planning escalates pressure, while Tony and Maria try to convert love into an escape plan. The midpoint shift is the rumble itself. Bernardo kills Riff and Tony kills Bernardo, and the story pivots from romance under threat to tragedy in motion. After this, every choice is shaped by grief, revenge, and fear. What changes here is that the cost of backing down becomes higher than the cost of escalation. Act 3. Climax and resolution. The climax is triggered by Anita's lie after the assault, which reaches Tony and sends him into the open at the exact moment Chino is hunting him. The resolution comes through Maria's confrontation, where she breaks the gang script long enough for both sides to feel shame. After the climax, Chino is taken by the police, the gangs carry Tony's body together, and the ending lands on shared grief with a thin hint of learning. Analysis and themes. Theme 1. Belonging built on an enemy. Claim: the gangs survive by defining themselves against a rival, and that definition demands violence. Evidence: Riff treats the rumble as necessary proof of the Jets' identity, and Bernardo reads Tony's interest in Maria as an attack on family honor. Even when Tony argues for restraint, the group interprets restraint as weakness, and fear of humiliation pushes them forward. So what? Identity can feel safest when it is simple. Us versus them. But an identity that needs an enemy also needs conflict, or it collapses, and people protect the group story even when it harms them. Theme 2. Love as a private truth in a public war. Claim: Tony and Maria's love is real, but their world turns intimacy into provocation. Evidence: their relationship becomes an escape plan, because staying means living under surveillance from family, friends, and police. When they try to communicate through Anita and Doc, the feud contaminates the message and trust collapses at the exact wrong time. So what? Love can reshape a person's choices, but it cannot instantly rewire a community's incentives. The film shows how romance can be crushed when the environment rewards vengeance more than peace. Theme 3. Masculinity and the economics of humiliation. Claim: violence functions as a status system for boys who feel stripped of power. Evidence: the rumble is ritualized, with rules and seconds, because the fight is also performance. Both gangs posture constantly, terrified of losing face, until escalation feels like the only way to stay visible. So what, when dignity is scarce, people chase it through spectacle. The story maps how humiliation turns into a craving for decisive, legendary moments. Theme 4. Authority that controls but does not care. Claim: adult institutions amplify conflict because they offer force instead of protection. Evidence: Schrank and Krupke mock and threaten the gangs, trying to dominate rather than reduce harm. Maria is questioned aggressively instead of being protected as someone in danger, and the gangs learn that the official world expects them to fail. Doc tries to mediate, but he has limited reach and no power over the street's hunger for revenge. So what? Order without legitimacy creates its own rebels. When authority relies on contempt, it deepens resentment and strengthens group identity. Theme 5. Dehumanization as permission. Claim: racism and dehumanization lower the moral cost of cruelty until cruelty feels normal. Evidence: the gangs use slurs and stereotypes to flatten rivals into symbols. The Jets' assault on Anita shows what that flattening enables. The jump from taunting to violence happens because the group has decided she does not deserve safety. So what? Dehumanization is not only ideology, it is practice. It spreads through jokes and rituals, then becomes a license for harm, especially when nobody expects accountability. Character arcs. Protagonist, Tony. At the start, Tony believes personal self-control can separate him from the Jets and that a decent job can erase the past. By the end, he believes love is worth public commitment and moral responsibility, but he still underestimates how quickly violence drags him back. The forcing moments are returning to the dance, failing to stop the rumble, and choosing flight with Maria after he kills Bernardo. Maria, at the start, Maria believes adulthood will be romance and possibility, and that the world will make room for her happiness. By the end, she believes the only honest act is to tell the truth about what hatred creates, even if nobody wants to hear it. The forcing moments are the instant love at the dance, the choice to forgive Tony, and the final confrontation with the gun. Anita. At the start, Anita believes in survival through strength and pragmatism. Keep your dignity, protect your people, and make a life where you can. By the end, she is broken by assault and uses a lie as retaliation, showing how trauma can corrupt moral intention. The forcing moments are agreeing to help Maria, being attacked at docks, and watching her words become a death sentence. Craft and structure. What makes it work? Dance functions as language. Choreography expresses threat, flirtation, and territory without needing exposition, and group movement shows how identity swallows individuals. The pacing is compressed on purpose. Love moves fast because time is short, and songs concentrate emotion into decisions so the violence feels like the release of pressure, not a random twist. The film also uses contrast as a knife. Bright music and bold color sit next to threat, so the audience feels how close joy and danger are in these characters' lives. The musical form becomes a kind of cruel honesty. When emotion is too large for speech, it has to become song, and that size is exactly what makes the later silence so devastating. What most summaries miss. Many summaries reduce the film to love versus hate. The deeper point is that hate is organized. The rumble is a ritual that manufactures meaning for boys who feel invisible, so violence becomes identity work, not only anger. Also overlooked is how practical the lovers are. Tony and Maria do not only dream, they build an escape plan with timing, money, and intermediaries. Their tragedy is not blindness to danger. It is living in a world where trust collapses, messages mutate, and fear becomes the default interpretation of everything. Relevance today. Online culture makes tribal identity easy. Politics, fandom, and lifestyle become teams, and loyalty is tested through pylons. Rumors still move faster than corrections, especially where trust is already broken. Policing and legitimacy remain central, and humiliation from authority can strengthen, rather than weaken group identity. Immigration and belonging still shape city conflict, where status and safety feel scarce. Performance masculinity still drives escalation, and the fear of looking weak can outweigh the fear of consequences. Gendered violence is still used as group punishment, aimed at bodies as symbols. Neighborhood change still displaces people. turning space into a pressure cooker where identity and economics collide. Ending explained. West Side Story ends by stripping away every excuse the gangs use to justify themselves. Tony dies because revenge reaches him first, and because a lie, born from trauma, pushes him into the open at the worst moment. Maria's final confrontation forces both groups to see that their rules have produced only corpses. The ending means the story is not warning against love, it is warning against environments that treat hatred as belonging. It resolves the immediate conflict through shock and grief, but it refuses to pretend the deeper conditions have been fixed. The last image is not peace. It is a pause that arrives too late for the people who paid the price, and it asks whether anyone can learn without first losing someone. Why it endures. West Side Story endures because it uses musical beauty to tell an ugly truth about how conflict reproduces itself. It gives the rush of first love and the swagger of group identity, then shows how quickly both can be weaponized. The film is for viewers who want emotion with consequence, and who can handle a story that refuses comfort. It may not satisfy viewers who want naturalistic realism at every moment or who struggle with heightened musical style. It can also be emotionally difficult because it treats cruelty as ordinary and shows how easily good intentions are punished. In the end, it leaves the same question it began with: can love survive in a world that rewards revenge? More insight, less noise. Subscribe and explore the full range at taylortailored.co.uk.